We're now recording. Welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar. I'm Shannon Dill. I'm with University of Maryland Extension, and we conduct these the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. So we're happy to have everyone logging in today to talk about managing farm family finances. We are recording and we'll be sending out the slide set as well as the recording following this session for those that registered. If you have any questions, feel free to add those to the chat pod. And before we get started, I would like to say a big thank you to our sponsors of the Mid-Atlantic Women in Agriculture program, as well as all the collaborators that we work with here in the Mid-Atlantic. With that, I'm going to now turn the session over to Jesse and Maria. I'm sure they're going to be introducing themselves as they begin their session. And again, any questions you might have, just add those to the chat pod. So Maria and Jesse.
Great, thank you. So thanks everyone for joining us. We're really pleased to be with you today. And as Shannon said, we are going to be talking about managing farm family finances resiliently. And today, as she said, Jesse and I will be working with you. I'm with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, and I'm an extension educator in family and consumer science with a focus primarily on financial management, but have been doing health insurance education as well as farm stress and kind of working a lot around farm resilience lately. And I'll let Jesse introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Jesse Ketterman. I'm in the Western Cluster of Maryland. I'm an extension educator in family and consumer sciences, also with an emphasis on financial literacy. And I work in many of the same areas as Maria, which is probably why we present together so much, but finances, health insurance literacy, farm stress management, and the farm resiliency piece. So we hope to touch on almost all of these today. So I'll turn it back over to Maria.
Great, thank you. So just to kind of start out, I think one of the things I've learned over my many years of doing financial management education is that unfortunately, we're not born with financial skills, right? They really need to be learned and practiced. And what I have found over time is the more people within the family who are involved in helping to make decisions and there's communication, the better it is. But, that can not be very easy, right? So financial education is really important to practice and to learn. And the other thing that I've learned over time is that there's no right or wrong way. There are some things that are just right? But how you set it up for yourself or how you might set it up for your family might be different based on a whole host of things. Including your learning style, how you manage relationships with money, what your goals are, all of those things. And of course, then when you have a partner or family members involved, things can get complicated. And so it's really important to kind of work through those things and come up with a way that best works for you all. So having said that, this is something that I've also learned and want to share is, the budget equation is the budget equation, meaning the math, right? What's coming in, the income is supposed to, right, add up. Spending, saving, and debt added up should equal your income. And so the math part is the easy part, right? It either adds up or it doesn't add up. And so and that is always the way it's going to be. The problem is, is that everybody's life situation and perspective and what they value and their beliefs around money is a little bit different. And how we communicate about money is a little bit different. The power, kind of situation within families is a little bit different. And so all of that is what makes money management complicated, and one of the reasons why we tend to avoid it, right? And so that's why I have that funny little picture with all those equations on there, because the equation, right, either adds up or doesn't add up. But it's all that other stuff that kind of makes it tricky and more difficult, I'll just say. Right? So hopefully today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the unique characteristics of farm families and their finances, talk about what financial security and resilience looks like, and then review some strategies that you can use to take control of your finances. So just to start out, we wanted to acknowledge that for farm families, finances can be tricky, right? So some of the reasons why, right, we came up with is that, the financial structure of the farm business may impact what's happening on the family side. And so sometimes there are competing goals between what might be happening with the family and what might be happening with the farm enterprise. And so that can complicate things, make things tricky as you're juggling. And even that can change over the seasons, right? So, and with that, there may be some fluctuating income and expenses for the farm that then has an impact on the family. Another thing that can make it tricky is that there may be some competing needs or goals that are different for the farm and the family. And so it takes some time and thinking about what are those goals, and then how do we plan for them, both for the farm and the family. And so all of that really adds kind of like double the financial stress as you're kind of worried about both parts. And sometimes there's, as I said, competing between sort of the income and the farm income side of things, and what might be family goals and what you're hoping to achieve with your family. So sometimes the success of the farm, right, determines the success of the farm family, or the family finances, excuse me. And sometimes it's the other way around. So sometimes, say, off-farm income is the thing that's really helping the farm enterprise succeed. So that's really important to acknowledge, because not all families have those same kinds of characteristics as they're trying to manage their finances, their family finances. So that was our kind of ideas about what makes farm family finances a little tricky or stressful. We wondered, were there some other things, or do you agree with those things? And if there are some other things, or if you agree with them, can you put it in the chat? So to do that, you would kind of click on the chat button, right? And then there's a place where you can designate who you want to send the message to. So if you wouldn't mind, you could send it to the host and the presenter. You could send it to everyone. Pick who you want to send your message to, and then you can type your message and just hit return, and then it'll come to us. So we would love to hear your thoughts about, what does making farm family finances tricky or stressful for you?
And as you type into the chat box, just make sure you send it to host and presenter, or all attendees, so that whatever your options are, so we can see what the questions are. And Shannon, if anybody sends anything directly to you, I'm sure you're going to share with us.
Yes, there's one that says elderly parents and future healthcare needs.
Great. The feeling, let's see, we have someone say the feeling that regulations change often, making it difficult to predict the future. Yeah, and someone else is not always having set goals for the farm. Yeah, so sort of living in an unpredictable world, right? Whether it's changes in regulations or changes in the weather or changes in health, right? All of those things can really impact the family finances. And then the goals, right? Whether it's a family goal or a farm goal, how do they integrate and how do they really support one another is important too. So thank you for sharing those ideas and those things that kind of stress you out around finances. So I wanted to also kind of start with like, well, what does resilience and resiliency really mean? There's kind of not so much confusion, but like we have a feeling about what this is. We don't necessarily really know, right? And so definitions are always a good place to start. And so resilience is really the current capital or the resources that we have to draw upon to address change in stressful situations. And resiliency is the processes or the actions that we can use to help build resilience or build those resources. So a little bit tricky, right? But not too tricky, right? Resilience is the stuff or the resources, and resiliency are those actions. And so, as Jesse and I said, we've been working a lot in this area and trying to kind of figure out how do we help farms and farm families become more resilient. And so I kind of put together this list, right, of what do each of these things look like? And so if I had asked you, what does resilience mean? Or what does resilience skills, what do they include? Here is that kind of that list, right? In terms of characteristics, it'd be things like being adaptable and hopeful and flexible and being able to communicate and wanting to learn to sort of help improve oneself and being social and interactive, especially when in times of need, when you're kind of needs social support or maybe even help from others, right? Being prepared, having reserves, being a little diversified, and from a personal perspective, diversified kind of means having multiple interests, right? And then being able to kind of bounce back and even move ahead, right? Move forward. So not letting negative things bring you down or keep you down. So those are some of those characteristics. And then those skills, right, on the right-hand side are things like, being able to adapt to change and integrate change, being able to communicate effectively, being organized, using resources effectively, problem solving, sharing feelings, being compassionate, creating meaning from experiences that you have, learning from those experiences, and building that strong relationships and social capital, and then practicing healthy coping behaviors. So, I mean, that's just general, right? But when you think about this from a financial perspective, I can look at this list and go, okay, so what does this mean from financially, right? So it's some of the same things, right? Being flexible, being able to adapt, asking for help when you need it, communicating about your concerns, your values, your goals, doing some problem solving, communicating about things, sharing your feelings, trying to create meaning, creating plans. And then, I was thinking about this last one, practicing healthy coping behaviors from a financial perspective. That means like not shopping when you are, feeling down, right? What's that expression? The tough go shopping when the chips are down or something like that, right? So you don't want to do that, right? That can put you, that's not a healthy coping behavior. So these are some of these same skills are really important when it comes to kind of resolving financial stressors as well. So one of the things I think that's really an important place to start, what I have learned over the years, is sort of understanding what's happening on the family side and developing that family budget or spending plan that helps you incorporate in some of those really important family goals. And it could also incorporate the farm goals, right? But it needs to incorporate in, build in funds to support those goals. And figuring out what the spending leaks are. And so spending leaks are those things that, you know, you had $20 and all of a sudden you don't have $20, right? And you don't really know where it went. So what are those leaks and how do I kind of, you know, stop things from leaking? Understanding the actual costs for things and whether or not that's something you really choose to want to continue, right? Cable is a huge one. We just disconnected from cable and it's amazing. We're saving $100 a month. It's amazing. So understanding what the actual costs are and are there some other ways to kind of get around them. And then plan for things like financial irregularity, which for some farm families, that's, you know, another way is kind of seasonal income, right? What's the ups and downs over the year? Trying to reduce debt, planning for retirement, and I'm going to add in there healthcare because that's a big part of what happens as we retire. Our physical well-being, our mental well-being may shift a little bit, and we need some extra money to support those. And then, you know, what are those educational plans for children? And so to begin to build in those really important goals is part of developing a really good spending plan or budget. So what I like to try and do is to get people to think about where do you want to be, right? Create a picture in your head of where you want to be in say 2 to 3 years or maybe 5 years. And, you know, I'm just going to say, close your eyes, take a deep breath. Let's take a moment. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Create a picture. Where do you want to be in 2 to 3 to 5 years? Create a picture in your head. What does the farm look like? What does the family look like? Where have you been? What have you accomplished? Hopefully everybody's got a really good picture. This picture is really important, and I'll tell you why. Because our brain works in pictures. And if you create this picture, your body, you know, in your brain, your body will eventually follow, right? And so it's really important to have this picture. It can motivate you to stay on track. You know, and as we sort of like translate this picture into steps or language, we want to do it in a positive way to really motivate us to move forward, right? And so that those visuals, right? So sometimes when I do a workshop, I'm having people cut up pictures from magazines and creating a poster of the things that they want in their life and the accomplishments that they've had and what they hope for their future, because those visuals will help carry you, right? And it also helps you communicate. So this is what I want for our future, for my family, or for our family, for our farm. It really can help motivate and keep you moving forward. So from that picture, you can begin to then look at how does this relate to kind of the typical financial goals, right? Financial goals, this is what we call a goals hierarchy. And you kind of see down at the bottom is you know, being solvent, meaning being able to pay your bills, having that emergency reserve so that you can be resilient when not so great things happen. You know, having access to credit, in a healthy way. You know, having the right kind of insurances and risk protection, and that includes health insurance, right? And then the home ownership piece, and then investment and estate planning, and you kind of, you know, that strong foundation is really important for helping you feel secure emotionally, but also building a strong financial foundation. And those are, you know, having that reserve is one of the ways that you can manage and address unexpected shifts. So some of the typical goals that we've seen for families and farm families are things that are kind of listed here, right? Wanting to increase savings, reducing debt, having money for, you know, kind of fun things or things that you hope that you can have for your family or your business. So those are kind of typical family goals, right? Farm goals might be things like new equipment or more land, or, you know, expanding, diversifying, kind of being able to have funds to do something different. And then, you know, having the kind of the advantages of goal setting are really helps you make tough decisions, right? If I'm choosing, if I have a bunch of options and a limited amount of income or money, having goals helps set those priorities. And so that you can say, well, this is a priority, the money's going to go here, and we'll put this other item on hold for now. So it can help you keep track. And as I said, it can help you communicate more about what's important and directions you want to go. So one of the other pieces I think that's really important to recognize is time frames. So for some families, you know, who may be living kind of paycheck to paycheck, short term, maybe this week, intermediate term, maybe next week, and long term might be next month. And for other families, that time frame may be different, right? Less than a year, 1 to 5 years, or 5 years or more for kind of that long term. And then other families, it's short term's less than 5 years, intermediate's 5 to 10, long term is 10 years or more. And back in the beginning, I said there's no right or wrong way, right? So you need to figure out where you are, right? What is your typical time frame in terms of planning and your goal setting and whatnot. And then I'm going to tell you, and now you need to stretch, right? Because if you're working on this week, next month time frame, you need to be adding, okay, what about in 6 months? What do I need to be thinking about for 6 months from now? And if you're in that, you know, less than a year, 1 to 5, 5 or more years, you need to be thinking about, okay, well, what about 10 years? Right. And for those who are thinking more long term, that's great. You're right on track. But you might stretch a little bit more and say, okay, so what about, you know, 25 years out? Because all of that is going to then impact and reprioritize some of how you're spending today, right? Because now you're thinking a little bit about the future. So I just want to pause there and say, any questions about that one? Because that may be a little bit different way of thinking about things. Seeing anything in the chat. So I'm going to move on here. So you've probably heard about this before. It's this idea of a SMART goal, right? And SMART goals kind of give some characteristics to what a good, solid goal looks like, sounds like, right? And so it's this idea that goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, right? That's where the SMART comes from. And so it's really about clearly identifying and writing down some goals, putting a price tag next to that, setting a specific date, developing that plan, the idea of, starting now in whatever little way you can and picturing that goal in your head. And then, revisiting every once in a while. How am I doing? Am I achieving that? And so what I'm going to challenge you to do is think about that picture that I had you kind of visualize, a few minutes ago. Pick one of the things in that picture and can you write a SMART goal, right? Can you take one of the things, because your picture may have lots of things going on in it, right? But if it's my kids have graduated from college. So what does that mean? Can you put a price tag on it? What do you need to do to help make that happen? And try to clearly identify and write down that goal. What's the price tag? When's the date? What's the plan? Right? What do you need to be doing now to kind of start working on it? All right. And then, just as an example, right? There's a big difference between these two goals, right? I need a new car and I need a reliable car by September that has a monthly payment of less than $250 a month and is still affordable if I can put down $2,000 down payment and pay it off in 5 years. Oh, and I'd like it to be blue and 4-door. Right. So totally different goal, right? The first one is like this pie in the sky. Maybe I'll get there, maybe I won't, right? And the second one is more tangible, right? And you can look at that and go, can I really do that? And maybe you need to adjust it, but it's adjustable because it's tangible. So we'll pause there. And if you've got any questions, please let me know. This time, I'm going to turn things over to Jesse.
So Maria, I dropped in the chat box a link to a resource that can help someone develop a SMART goal. So this was created by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, often referred to as the CFPB. But it's a great tool that you can use to start to develop your own SMART goals.
Thanks, Jesse.
So now let's talk about a spending plan and really kind of the steps that we need to go through to develop a spending plan. And so as you can see here, we need to develop a list of our income streams. Where is our income coming from? And that may be the farm income. It may be off-farm income. You may have government benefits that you receive. But making a list of all the income you receive is kind of the first step in starting to develop a spending plan. And then you need to work on the expenses, right? So you're going to have different types of expenses. Some of them may be monthly expenses. So you think about your electric bill or your cable bill or your phone bill. All those are monthly expenses. And then you have periodic expenses. And so an example of a periodic expense may be your car insurance if you pay it every 6 months. And so you want to kind of get an idea of what periodic expenses that you have. And there, once you have your income and expenses, you're thinking, well, I have everything I need. But no, that's not the case. You also need to go back to those goals and make sure your goals are incorporated into your spending plan as well. And I see we have a question here. What is the measure of whether a goal is achievable or not? I think the measure there is tied into the R. Is it realistic, right? So you don't want to develop a goal where you're saying, I want to have $1 million when I retire, but you don't put any money into retirement. right? So you're not really setting up an achievable goal if you don't have some action items that go along with that goal. So, and again, you want to make sure that when you're looking at your spending plan, you're incorporating those goals into your spending plan. You also need to kind of determine and make a list of the debt that you have. And again, when we talk about refining your expense worksheet, if you have all this in some type of spreadsheet, a lot of times people, again, have that income and expenses, but they don't incorporate the goals. So you may have to go back and refine that. And you also may need to refine it from month to month as expenses change. You may find your phone bill goes up, or your cable. I mean, Maria mentioned cable. Every year I have to fight with the cable company because they just try to automatically increase my cable bill, and then I have to go back and call them and work through that. But that would be an example of when I might have to refine my expense worksheet. And then set up your monthly spending plan. So you want to look at kind of how you have done things in the past with spending, where do you want to go, and that way you can kind of start to monitor as you go along. Okay, this is what I'm looking at next month. How am I doing along the way? And that's setting up the monthly spending plan there. And we have some ideas there in the chat of ways to save some money. So this is a worksheet that you can use to develop a spending plan, and you can see it starts off there. And we're gonna share this with you. We're gonna send this out with some of the resources after the workshop today. But you first, again, you'd look at that monthly income. You can see there this has wages and has some other categories. Anywhere that you're getting your income from, you want to kind of include in that section. So you want to take your income, make a list. You can decide whether you want to use the second part, deductions taken away from your pay. Sometimes it's good to know what things you have going out of your pay, but essentially you're still, again, how much income is coming in versus the expenses that are going out. And so some of those deductions may be your federal taxes, your state taxes, FICA, Social Security, Medicare, life insurance, etc. And again, when you're thinking about your farm income, you have to think about how that plays out in terms of taxes too, right? So you might have to set some money aside because you may have to pay self-employment tax periodically throughout the year. And then you see in the middle column, you have expenses there. You have your housing expenses. You may have some other expenses there as well. If really there's with the farming population, some farmers have their farm wrapped into their family income and family budget and family plan, and others have it separated. So if you have it all bundled together, then you got to kind of take into account some if you have land leases or whatever it may be in your expenses. Now, if you have it as a separate business and you just get income from the farm aspect of it, then you can keep that separate. You can see you have utilities there, and again, you may find with farm family finances, the electric may be ran through the business, through the farm business, versus your family income. So you got to, each situation is going to be a little different, but the important part is to make sure that you're tracking it and know where that money is being spent and where it falls into your spending plan. Of course, you have food. I always talk about food in terms of groceries and food away. And that's one of those kind of spending leaks that we find when we work with people with finances is they realize they don't track how often they're eating out. And then when they start to do that, they realize, man, I could save a lot of money by buying groceries. So that's one of those areas you get to talk about and have discussions around. Of course, some other areas, I don't need to walk through each of these: transportation, personal, where you have clothing, personal care, tobacco and alcohol. Tobacco and alcohol leads to an interesting discussion because, from my perspective, I don't care whether someone uses tobacco or someone uses alcohol, but it does play a role in how is it being a part of the family budget. So if you have a lot of money going into those two areas, it may be another one of those spending leaks that we talked about. Again, just some more, you need to keep track of your health expenses there. We have some educational expenses depending upon what your situation is there. If you have a pet, yes, pets cost money. That's interesting. My wife decided we were going to go down the route of getting some pets, and about every other month I find this new pet toy or new item to dish the food out in. And so again, there is an expense that goes along with it, so you need to make sure that's part of your spending plan as well. And then over on the right hand side, or at the bottom of the center, you have your savings goals. So remember, you have to have your goals incorporated into your spending plan. And then you have periodic expenses on the right, and you need to kind of divide them up over the course of 12 months. And then if you kind of work through this worksheet, you'll have your total income and your total expenses. And in the end, you want to make sure that you have a little more income than you do expenses, or at least that they equal out. And that's where you have to, again, reflect and make adjustments to your spending plan month to month, depending upon how your needs change and how your spending changes. So we have income sources. We just have a list here. Again, if you were trying to pull out a piece of paper and you could write down all your income sources, you have wages, you receive support, rental income if you maybe rent your property, or if you have a house on your property that you rent. You may have Social Security. There's some government assistance programs, investment income. You might be able to gain some extra income by getting the earned income tax credit or using your refund. Yard and garage sales, doing some freelance work, helping out, another farmer, right? You might be able to use your equipment and make money off of your equipment, and you may have income from child support or alimony. And I have a resource that we're going to share. Maria's going to put it in the chat box. And just some ideas, again, by the CFPB about some opportunities for you to go through a checklist to see if there's additional income opportunities for you. And Maria, if you could also go ahead and post in that the cutting expenses one as well. There's our two resources that we wanted to share with you today, and they'll also be part of the list that we're going to send out. So when you look at expenses, you have fixed expenses, flexible expenses, and periodic. Fixed are those ones that are the same every month, and the easiest two examples, if you have a car payment, that car payment is the same every month until it's paid off. That's a fixed expense. If you have a mortgage or rent, you're typically paying the same amount every month, so that makes it a fixed expense. Your flexible expenses, those are expenses that may go up and down in a given month. And so food, depending upon how, the types of groceries that you buy, your food expense is going to be flexible because it could go up and down. And that reinforces the importance of the spending plan, is to have an idea, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend on food, and stay within the budget for that area. Utilities can be flexible. If you live in Western Maryland like I do, about October, you start to see your gas bill increase. When you heat your house, your heat starts to kick on in October, and that's going to run you through typically through May. So it's a little longer season. And so that could create flexible expenses. Now with utilities, sometimes there's opportunities to get on payment plans. And so that may be something you explore a little bit. And the same with like auto insurance. The thing you need to be aware of with those things is, and I think auto insurance is a good example. If you get onto a monthly payment plan with auto expenses, they're typically going to charge you some type of service fee to do that. So it may be $1, it may be $5. I really don't know. But when you're starting to really analyze your spending, you may say, well, I may be able to save a little bit of money by paying it every 6 months. Then I don't have that extra fee. But you also have to reflect that in your spending plan to make sure you're setting aside that money. And then we all have these periodic expenses. It could be gifts. There's birthdays that occur throughout the year that you might be purchasing gifts for, holidays, etc. If you go on a vacation, maybe you have a vacation once a year. Again, getting that periodic expense plan to where it's part of your monthly budget and you're setting aside money is important when developing your own spending plan. Monthly expenses, prioritizing spending. So again, it's interesting because when I talk finances to different age groups, I still have the same conversation. When I'm speaking with elementary students, I talk to them about needs and wants, right? What are the things that I need? What are the things that I want? But the same holds true. And when I talk to the youth about it, I say, even today, I turn 50 tomorrow. At 50, I still have to figure out what my needs and wants are. So this is something that prioritizing really affects you throughout your entire life. We talked already about fixed and flexible, and then you also want to make sure that savings is part of your fixed expenses. So when you look at setting aside your spending plan, you do want to make sure that you're putting money aside towards savings. There's a couple different approaches towards that. We have a 10% here, so you set aside 10% of your fixed expenses to go to your savings. We could talk about emergency funds too, and having money set aside for an emergency fund. Typically, you want at least 3 months of your expenses set aside in an emergency fund, and so there's some different strategies there as well that you want to consider. Another idea to share is allowances for everyone. And so, setting an amount that each person has control over, right? And when you do that, you can everybody takes on some level of responsibility with the family budget by doing that. And so it's interesting. When I take my 2 boys through the drive-through at McDonald's, one of them orders a McDouble cheeseburger, which I think is like $2.50 now. And the other one likes to order, the McChicken Deluxe sandwich, which cost about $7. And, when you can get everyone involved in saying, hey, this is my portion of what I can spend, then they start to realize that hey, wait a minute, maybe I can get 2 sandwiches at the price I'm buying one. So that's just something to consider when you think about allowances for everyone. We talked about this already, but building savings into your plan, make sure that you're saving regularly, that you have an emergency fund, and then you're incorporating your SMART goals into your spending plan. You also want to make a list of your debts. And, the list is pretty simple, right? Who do you owe money to? What is the balance on that debt? What is my monthly payment? And you may want to add a column for what interest rate you're paying on that money. But at least, having that list of who and how much and what your payment is. There's a tool that's been created by some of our extension partners called powerpay.org. And basically it allows you to put in all your debts, and then you can work through different scenarios as to the strategies to pay off those debts. So it's a good tool. It's a reliable tool that you can use, and it's called powerpay.org. And like I said, you can visit that site and learn how to use it. There's some videos there that'll show you the steps you need to walk through to enter your information. You do have to set up an account with them, but it's a great tool for you in terms of developing a plan to pay off your debts.
I also put another tool in the chat, Jesse.
Okay, great. Yeah. Did you want to talk about it? Because I don't see what you put in there on my side. So if you wanted to say a few words, feel free.
Well, it's again, the tool from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on kind of that debt. It's called a debt action plan tool that helps you kind of organize and prioritize and come up with a payment plan to pay off your debt.
Yeah, and that tool kind of talks about two different approaches there. There's the debt snowball method, and most people have probably heard about the debt snowball method through Dave Ramsey. It's one of the tools that he talks about. And basically the debt snowball, if you have 5 different debt level, different types of debt, and one of them you're paying $30 a month on, and the most expensive one you're paying $500 a month on. And this approach is let's focus our efforts on getting that $30 a month payment paid off, and we'll instead of maybe paying $30, we'll pay $50 to this one. And then when you get that debt paid off, you move up to the next biggest debt and take that $50 you were paying towards that first one and apply it to the next one. And so when you think about it, it's called a debt snowball. If you think about a snowball rolling down the hill, it gets larger and larger as it goes down. That's that same approach to tackling the debt, where your payment towards your debt is getting larger and larger as you pay off the smaller debts. That's the debt snowball. There's also the interest method mentioned in that worksheet. And the interest method, takes a little different approach. It says, focus on paying off the debt that has the highest interest rate, because that's where you're paying the most money to someone else on that debt. That one can be a little more complicated, and in the long run, what you need to develop is one that works for you. And I always encourage people, it's always easier to go the simple route. And I think the debt snowball method is probably easier. But if you wanted to kind of do the math and see which one works better for you, you could create a kind of a chart and say, okay, this is how much interest I'm going to pay if I go the debt snowball method. This is how much interest I'm going to pay if I go the interest method. And I'm trying to save, every little bit that I can. And so I'm going to go this route because it saves me a little bit on interest. But I think the bigger point is you want to focus on getting out of debt, right? You have a lot more freedom when you can get out of debt.
And I'll just add that powerpay.org program is great because it kind of helps you figure out there's different strategies to paying down debt, and it actually does the math for you in terms of like how much it will save you if you do one strategy over another. So it's an excellent tool. I use it all the time.
And so here we have refining the plan, balancing the budget, and there's 2 ways to balance your budget, right? You either have to reduce your expenses or reduce the money going out, or increase the money coming in. And so and you could incorporate both of them. But what are some things you can do to reduce expenses? Well, can you lower your food expenses? Can you lower your utilities? Whatever it may be. But again, you're trying to make small changes, so don't think that you need to make a radical step to make an impact on balancing your budget. Little steps are going to make a difference. Again, looking at what other sources are out there to increase income. We shared that tool earlier. That's a great tool to give you some ideas of ways that you can increase your income. We mentioned earlier the income tax credit. There's also a VITA program, volunteer income tax assistance. So if you're paying money to have your taxes done by someone else, you might consider using the VITA program to do that. Of course, always find freebies, share resources. Those are all examples of ways. Reducing debt, again, is going to free up your money. And again, getting your children incorporated in the family budget and having discussions with them is also going to help. And it's going to give them skills that they're going to be able to use later on in life. So here is another thing to think about. Again, this kind of goes back to the wants versus needs kind of idea, but figure out how much you really make per hour and then apply that amount to everything you buy. So, if you want to buy something and it's worth, I don't know, $100 and you make $20 an hour, that's going to take you 5 hours to earn that item. And so then you can ask yourself, man, is this item really worth 5 hours of work? And again, I'm going small with $100, right? So when you think of bigger items, you can really say, wow, do I want, is this really worth it? Am I really willing to put this much effort into buying this? Is it, again, is it a need or is it a want? We talked about, again, you need to start tracking things. There's several different ways that you can track your expenses. The envelope method, it's been around for a while, and it's that whole concept of I'm going to have specific amounts of money to use in different areas. So I might have an envelope that's labeled groceries, and then when I go buy groceries, I use up that envelope, and then again, I'm staying within. If I put $200 in there, that's my budget for groceries, and I need to make sure that I stay within that. And so it's a way to hold yourself accountable to stay within the money you have allotted for a different area. You have a receipt box method. Again, that's keeping the receipts, putting them in there, and then kind of keeping track as you go using receipts. You can use record books. You can look at your checkbook. There's computer programs, whether it be Excel or Quicken or QuickBooks. There's different programs that help you track your money that you can use. And nowadays, there's all kinds of apps. And so I have an app. I use every dollar, and I kind of track how much I'm using in different areas. And how you use these things is going to depend upon your situation. For me, the big thing is tracking how much I'm spending on me when I go out and eat for lunch and those kind of things when I'm by myself. Usually, work related kind of stuff. I'm on the road. How much am I spending? And then how much am I spending for my family when we go out to dinner? And so this using the app helps me track that, so I can just kind of keep an eye on how much I'm spending month to month on those items. I don't really track, say, my electric bill per se, because I know that's going to be pretty consistent and there's not too much I can do to change that one. So everybody's going to have their own approach, but the important thing is, again, tracking and having a plan.
And some people use multiples, right? So for something like grocery, you might use the envelope. For everything else, you might use receipts. And then at the end of the month, kind of sort your receipts and add it up. So like I said before, no right or wrong way. It's what's going to help you make it happen.
So we had a question in the chat, and I scanned over it. I don't know. Maybe Maria can listen to my answer, and maybe if I didn't cover it all, she can read a little more detail. But what happens when you have irregular expenses? I think you have to use what I would say is your best guess, right? You don't know how much income you're going to have, because you don't know what the price of beans will be when you harvest the crop. And so, I think, and Shannon, I'm sure, has some webinars on this about enterprise budgeting and so forth. But you have to go into something having an idea of what you need to make out of it to make it profitable. And so, in some cases, your income, you may have to make some assumptions in your planning, knowing that it may not be perfect. But you also, on the farm side, from a planning side, you also need to kind of keep track of those things, because you may find, I need to shift how I'm farming, because this item that I'm producing right now isn't profitable anymore, right? So you may have to make adjustments just based upon that. And so there's a whole different element to this when it comes to farm budgets, and kind of predicting what income's going to be, knowing that you're going to have certain given expenses, right? And Shannon, feel free if you wanted to add anything there, you're welcome to do so.
Absolutely. There's some great templates on enterprise budgets and putting together very commodity or product specific enterprise budgets to make some big decisions about inputs, costs, even what you're going to price the product at.
And so I see a second part of this question of what can help families establish goals under these unpredictable conditions. Again, you have to make some estimates, but you do have to, it goes back to the goals piece. What are your goals? What are the goals for the farm? What are the goals for your family? And you know, when you do the planning part, a lot of it's going to work out because you're going to see where you may be getting ahead, you may see where you're getting behind, and then you can make adjustments along the way. But if you don't look at these, if you don't track these things in both areas, right, the farm budget and the family budget, then you don't know what's happening, and then everything's a surprise to you, and it creates additional stress that you have to deal with. And so again, estimates, and then reflect back and see, did this work out the way I thought it did? And if it didn't, are there things I can change to make it work out the next time?
I think I want to just add something here too, is, for some farms, like they're using the same checking account for both the enterprise and the family. And, really it's going to be hard to keep track of everything when it's set up that way. So one strategy is to kind of have a separate checking account for the family side of things. Then you have a little bit more control, and you can also be more realistic in terms of what the farm needs to be paying you to keep the family going the way you need to keep the family going, right? So, in some enterprises that I've talked with, it's like, well, whatever's left over, the family can have, except that there's never anything left over, right? So it can be a very frustrating situation, especially when it's, sort of competing farm and family goals, I'll just say. But if you start with, well, what does it really take for the family to financially to live and accomplish some of those really important goals, if you have a sense of what that is, then you can begin to have a conversation around, well, what does the farm really need to be producing so that we can, have a financially secure family life. So that's an important piece. And to kind of circle back around to that intermittent income question, the other benefit of having a sense of what does it take for the family to live on is then you can begin to say, all right, well, we need, I'm just going to make this up, $2,500 a month to live on. So as the income comes in, and maybe it's one time a year or a quarter during the year when the income is coming in, you can say, well, you know what, we need $2,500 a month in the months that we don't have income coming in, and that needs to be set aside so we have it, right? And so you can begin to plan, kind of how do we take care of the family as well as the farm? And as that farm income comes in, can set aside the money to support the family over the months where there is no income coming in. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And I know we want to try to wrap things up as close as we can to one here. So I'll touch on a couple concepts here in terms of record keeping, how long you keep, how long, what to keep, where to keep it. A lot of this depends upon what the information is going to be needed for. So if you have a receipt because an item has a warranty on it, you're going to want to keep it the length of the warranty. If you have records that you need to keep because you might be audited, then you need to make sure you keep it the length of the period of time that it may be audited. And then where to keep them, it has to do really with your ability to replace the item. And so if you have a title for a car, you probably want to keep that in a locked box. That was, so those are or a fireproof safe. So, you know, you just got to think about how valuable is this particular item, this particular piece of paper, as to how long and where you want to keep it. And again, when it comes to record keeping, you just want to kind of keep it simple, know who is responsible for what aspect of it. And so a couple other suggestions there, but those are the two big things. Keep it simple, keep a track of who's responsible for it. And then 4 B's for financial emergency. I'm not going to go into these now, but I can tell you that when we come back at the end of October, we'll kind of jump a little more into these things. You know, how do you establish buffers in emergencies? How does borrowing play into that? What backstops can you create, and benefits? So we'll touch on this when we talk about resiliency, financial resiliency next month. We have some resources here. Here's a list of resources in Delaware. We're going to send this PowerPoint out so you can have this information. The same, we have a list of Maryland resources, and you know, again, some parting guidance in terms of, you know, it's a journey. You got to be patient. Sometimes you're not going to know, and you can ask questions to find out. Maria and I are always willing to assist. And, you know, there's a lot of stress that goes along with financial issues, and you have to work through that stress as well. But you can do it. That's the big thing. And when we wanted, or Maria was talking about resiliency earlier, you know, be optimistic. You know, you can get through this. It's just going to take some time and some planning. There was a couple, when we started developing this, a couple articles that were specifically about farm family finances. That's going to be on a list of resources that we share with you. And then Maria has a link to an evaluation she's going to post in the chat box. And we thank you for attending, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. And I'm going to turn things back over to Shannon, who's going to probably introduce the next workshop.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jesse and Maria. Really appreciate having you talk about really important subject. I mean, getting finances straight, whether, you know, it really starts at the house and the family before you can really talk about the farm and the farm business. So we really appreciate you bringing that up and providing some really good resources. We will be sending these out along with the recording within probably the next 24 hours to you. So stay tuned for an email. It'll come through our Eventbrite registrations. Happy to answer any questions. If anyone wants to put those in the chat pod, I'll double check them there. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.